The gravity plates came up to 1.6 standard at the 4th hour, and the cadet on my left went down without a sound. Two Drask orderlies dragged him off the line by his harness while the rest of us held the rack position, 40 kilos across the shoulders, boots welded to the deck, and Gatemaster Vorik walked the rows, tasting the air above our heads. That was Gate 1 of the Sareth War Academy. They called it the Long Stand. You took the loaded rack at dawn, you held parade rest while the floor plates climbed past your homeworld's gravity, and you stood there until the Gatemaster decided the gate was closed. Nobody told you how long that took. Telling you would have been a mercy, and the gates of Sareth had a 60-year policy against mercy. I watched the orderlies stack the fallen cadet against the wall like cordwood. He was a Veshli, six-limbed, fast as a whip over 100 meters and built out of nothing past the 3rd hour. His eyes tracked us the whole way down the line, not angry, ashamed. The Vesh word for washing out of the gates translates as returning empty, and he was already practicing the face for it. Vorik reached me at the 5th hour. You heard him before you saw him. Drask joints don't flex the way ours do. They ratchet, a dry click on every stride, like a rifle bolt working slow. He was a head and a half taller than me, plated in gray chitin gone dark at the seams with age, and along his jaw ran 2 rows of thin quills that stirred on their own, combing the air, tasting it. The Drask read stress chemistry the way we read a face. Fear, fatigue, despair, it all comes off a body as molecules. And a Gatemaster's quills are calibrated finer than any machine in the medical wing. He stopped in front of me and the quills swung my way and spread. The human, he said. His translator gave him a voice like gravel settling. Cadet race, Gatemaster. He tasted the air over my collar for a long moment. Around us the plates hummed and somewhere down the line another body hit the deck, and his quills never moved off me. Do you know what I do on the first day, Cadet Reyes? You post the ledger, Gatemaster. I post the ledger. The quills folded flat, then spread again, like a man rereading a line he didn't believe. Every intake, I taste every cadet, and I write in the ledger the gate at which each of them will quit. 38 years I have kept it. Ask the registrar how often I have been wrong. I knew the answer. Everyone on the shuttle up from Kelt Station had known the answer. Never. 38 years of intakes, thousands of cadets, and Gatemaster Vorik had never once written the wrong gate next to a name. Your species is difficult, he said. You read wrong. A Drask broadcasts his breaking point 3 gates before he reaches it. The Osari go quiet a full day before they fall. But humans, the quills flicked, almost irritated. Humans read like they are already breaking. From the moment you woke this morning, your chemistry has been screaming. Cortisol, adrenaline, damage markers. You are a fire alarm that never stops ringing. There is no signal in you. Only noise. Sorry to be a bother, Gatemaster. The quills went very still. Down the row, a Marif cadet turned her head a centimeter to look at me, which under load at 1.6 was its own act of courage. Gate 4, Vorik said. The press. That is where you will quit, Cadet Reyes. I will write it in the ledger tonight. 4 humans have come to the gates of Sareth since the Accord forced your species on us. Not one of them saw Gate 4. You will see it, and it will close on you. He moved on, click, click, click down the line, and told a slab-shouldered Osari cadet he would quit at Gate 6, and told the Mariv she would quit at Gate 7, and every name went in the ledger that night, posted on the long wall outside the mess where the whole academy could read it and bet on it. That was the system. That was the pedagogy. You stood your first gate knowing exactly where the institution had decided you would die as a soldier, and the institution was never wrong. I held the rack until the plates wound down at the 9th hour. 190 cadets had started Gate 1 that morning. 141 of us walked off it. Here is what you need to know about me, and it isn't much. My name is Marisol Reyes. I was 19 years old that season, and before the Accord opened the officer track to humans, I spent my summers cutting fireline in the mountains of Western North America, hand crew. 20 people, hand tools, walking uphill into smoke while everything with sense walked out. That is the entire resume. No augments, no military bloodline, no tragedy. I came to Sareth because Earth got 6 seats a year in the Alien Command pipeline, and I wanted one, and because somewhere on a ridge above a burning drainage 2 summers earlier, I had found the edge of what I could do. And the edge wasn't where everyone said it was. I wanted to know where it actually was. The gates of Sareth claimed to know how to find it. That seemed worth the trip. The Academy sat on Kelt, a cold moon with a sky the color of dishwater, locked in orbit around a gas giant that filled a third of the horizon and never moved. The Ascendancy had trained its line officers there for 3 centuries. 9 gates run across a single brutal season. Past the first 8 and you commissioned. The 9th gate was different. The 9th was voluntary, and it was the reason people whispered the Academy's name. Ilvis explained it to me my second night in the barracks while I rewrapped my feet. Ilvis was a Quen, amphibious, slick-skinned, a head shorter than me, with a wide, lipless mouth and an accountant's love of exact numbers. 60 years ago, they rebuilt the ninth gate, Ilvis said. The old one had become survivable. The founders' heirs considered this a defect. Since the rebuild, 11 cadets have attempted it. All 11 failed. Failure at the ninth voids your commission entirely. You pass 8 gates, you attempt the ninth, you fail. You go home a civilian, so no one attempts it. It sits at the top of the hill and eats reputations once a decade. The mouth flexed, a Quinn shrug. The gatemaster attempted it himself as a cadet. 39 years ago, he broke at the 19th hour. They say the molt scar still shows on his back plates. What's in it? All 8 gates, condensed, alone, while the entire academy watches. Ilvis looked at me sideways, gills fluttering. The ledger has you at 4, human. Worry about 4. The whole academy worried about 4 on my behalf. By the end of the first week, there was a betting pool with 300 names in it, and the line wasn't whether Vorik was right. Vorik was always right. The line was whether I'd even reach the press before quitting on my own, the way the 4 humans before me had. That history followed me down every corridor. The first human had withdrawn at Gate 2 with a torn shoulder. The second and third quit together at Gate 3, sleepless and shaking, and signed the withdrawal forms with hands that couldn't make the letters. The fourth lasted to the eve of Gate 3 and walked to the landing pad in the night without telling anyone. The registrar, a narrow Drask named Selleck, kept their files in a drawer he opened for visiting dignitaries, the way you'd keep a record of an experiment that had been tried fairly and failed honestly. I learned the rhythm of the place. Reveille in the dark, the gas giant glowering through the mess windows, lectures on logistics and fire discipline in the forenoon, gate conditioning after. The aliens were not cruel to me mostly. The Veshli treated me like contaminated equipment. The Osari ignored me until they had measured me, which took them about a week, and after that one of them, a wall of gray muscle called Brakaven, started silently loading my rack to spec for me in the mornings, which I chose to take as a gesture of respect rather than an investment in the betting pool. And every day, twice a day, Gatemaster Vivek found a reason to pass me, and the quills swung out, and he tasted the ruin of my chemistry, and the plates of his face arranged themselves into something I eventually learned was disgust's first cousin, incomprehension. You should understand it is not personal, he told me, the morning of Gate 2. He had fallen into step beside me on the gravel track, joints clicking. The ledger is not cruelty. It is the only honest thing in this academy. Every cadet I have ever tasted carried his breaking point inside him like a sealed order. I read the order, I post it. The gate opens the envelope. That is all the gates are, Cadet Reyes, a machine for opening the envelope, so the Ascendancy does not find out what an officer is made of on the day a battle depends on him. And the ninth gate. The clicking stopped. We stood on the track with the wind coming down off the crater rim, and his quills folded back flat along his jaw, the way they did around the registrar, the way Drask do when they want to be unreadable. The ninth gate is the founder's question, he said. The first 8 ask what you are. The ninth asks what is past that. In 60 years, no one has answered it. You came closest. I shouldn't have said it. The quills snapped out once, a bare flash of something hot and fast, then folded away again, and when he spoke, the gravel in his voice had gone smooth and cold. I broke, he said, at the 19th hour on the wall section, 4 meters from the top. And I will tell you what I learned there, human, because you will need it at Gate 4. A break is not a failure of will. It is a fact of structure. The Drask word is Keldrath, the stop that does not start again. Every body has it. Every mind has it. The lie your species tells, I have read your military literature, your second wind, your dig deep. It is a lie of soft worlds. Nothing starts again. The gates exist to find the stop. He walked on ahead of me, click, 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 up the track toward the ridge where the second gate was waiting, and the wind took the warmth of the conversation away in about 4 seconds. I want to be honest about what I felt, because the story doesn't work if I pretend to be made of anything special. I was afraid of the gates. Anybody sane was. But standing on that gravel in the dishwater light, what I mostly felt was a kind of recognition. I had heard this speech before. Different mouth, same sermon. There is always an instructor, a foreman, a crew boss somewhere who has built a theology out of the place he broke, and the theology always has the same first commandment. Where I stopped, the world stops. I had cut line through country that 3 separate forecasters had declared impossible to hold. The fire hadn't read the forecast. I dug anyway. Gate 2 opened the next morning at first light, and they put 110 kilos of casualty sled in front of each pair of us and pointed at the crater rim 11 kilometers up a switchback grade and rang the bell. They paired me with Ilvis for the carry, which the betting pool considered a death sentence for both of us. A Quinn masses 50 kilos soaking wet, and the sled didn't care. The rules were simple the way a cliff is simple. 2 cadets, 1 loaded sled, 11 kilometers of switchbacks to the crater rim, and a clock that closed the gate at the 13th hour. Drop the sled for longer than 100 count, and the gate closed early, just for you. By the 3rd kilometer, the grade hit 18%, and the pairs ahead of us started coming apart. Vesely team sprinted and died, their fast-twitch bodies burning out in beautiful useless surges. An Osari pair ground past us like a glacier, even implacable, and I filed that away. That was the pace. Not the fastest you could go, the fastest you could go forever. Ilvis's legs gave at kilometer 7. Not dramatically. Quinn don't collapse, they just go liquid, joints folding the wrong way. And Ilvis hung in the harness making a thin whistling sound and said, "Withdraw me. I will sign at the rim station. Withdraw me, human." Nope. I leaned us into the strap. 100 count starts if we stop. We're not stopping. You cannot pull 110 kilos in me. You're going to walk, I said. You're just not going to pull. Hands on the rail, feet moving, that's all you owe me. I'll take the weight. There is a thing you learn on a hand crew. Hauling hose packs up a 40-degree slope at 2 in the morning, and it isn't strength. It's bookkeeping. You stop asking, can I, and you start asking, what does this 100 meters cost, and you pay it, and then you ask again. Never the summit, never the rim. Just the next switchback, the next anchor point, the next breath that goes all the way down. I put my shoulder into the strap and ran the books, 100 meters at a time for 4 hours, with Ilvis wheezing on the rail beside me and the gas giant hanging over the rim like a held breath. We crossed at the 12th hour, 51 minutes. 40 pairs made the rim. We were 38th. Vorik was at the rim station tasting every team as it staggered in. When we crossed, his quills tracked me the whole way past him, and what he said wasn't congratulations. "You carried her," he said. "The carry permits it, so I cannot fault it. But mark this in front of the gate, Cadet Reyes. Sentiment is a weight. The gates are crossed alone. Every kilo of someone else you carry is a kilo of yourself you will not have at the press." He turned to the assembled, dripping survivors and raised his voice. "Look at the human. She has spent at gate 2 what she will need at gate 4. The ledger thanks her for her honesty." A ripple of clicking went through the Drask cadets, their laughter. Ilvis, hanging off the rail, made a sound that wasn't laughter at all. That night, the medics ran their scanners over my shoulders and found what they always found in me, what they found in every human they'd ever scanned. Microtears, inflammation, damage markers lit up like a city at night. The duty medic, a soft-spoken Marav, read the panel twice and asked if I required evacuation. I asked her what for. She pointed at the screen. I told her that was what a good day looked like from the inside of a human, and she filed something in my record that I didn't get to read, and I went to bed. Gate 3 opened 30 hours later, and Gate 3 was the one that had ended both of the humans who quit together, the sleep gate. 40 continuous hours of duty tasks, navigation problems, ordnance assembly, watch rotations, signal logs under full instructional scrutiny with every error scored and no sleep. Simple as a cliff. The aliens broke at it in their different ways, and the ways taught me more about them than a year of lectures. The Vesely went first, as always. By hour 20, they were assembling fuses with their eyes open and their brains gone, and the proctors led them off one by one. The Marav held longer but started to sing, quietly, involuntarily, some flocking response older than their civilization, and were failed for it. The Drask cadets didn't sleep at all, because Drask don't, not the way we do. Their joints lock and their minds drop into a half-state they call the gray shelf. But the gray shelf needs chemical quiet to hold, and the gate was built to deny it. Random klaxons, shifted light cycles, proctors with sampling wands keeping the air sharp with alarm pheromones. By hour 30, the unbreakable Drask were walking into walls. At hour 33, the gate escalated, because the gates always escalated exactly when you had found your footing. That was the founder's signature, and you learned to feel it coming the way you feel a wind shift. The klaxons doubled. The light cycle started strobing between noon white and dusk red on no schedule at all, and the proctors began pulling cadets off their stations mid-task and reseating them at unfamiliar desks, so that whatever rhythm you had built died with the move. I got pulled off navigation at hour 34 and reseated at the ordnance bench. Fine motor work, fuse assemblies with tolerances that punished a tremor, and the cadet beside me was a young Vesely already 2 errors past probation. All 6 hands shaking, eyes glassing over the components like a man reading a language he'd forgotten. He was going to fail in the next 10 minutes and take a finger with him, the way his hands were wandering. The rules said nothing about talking. So I talked. Not encouragement, never encouragement. Encouragement is sugar and burns off in a minute. I gave him procedure, low and flat. The voice you use at 2 in the morning on a hose lay. 1 component, name it out loud, set it down square. Now the next one. Don't look at the tray. The tray is a liar. Look at the piece in your hand. He stopped shaking somewhere around the 4th fuse. The proctor at the end of the bench logged something on her tablet. I assumed it was a violation, and I assumed wrong. I found out at the gates close that she had logged an observation that went up the hill with all the others. Subject stabilizes adjacent personnel under degradation. Her bench note added in the dry Draskway that this was previously believed to be an instructor-grade skill. The Veshley passed the gate by one error. I never learned his name. He was from the coastal Kretches and shipped to a different battalion after the season, but for the rest of the year, every time my path crossed a knot of Veshley cadets, there'd be a quick six-limbed gesture in my direction, low, near the floor, like a salute performed by someone pretending not to perform it. Tessick told me what it meant, eventually. It is the sign their species makes toward a current that carried someone home. I had pulled night shifts on fire camps since I was 17. Here is the whole secret, and it isn't a secret. You build a scaffold of small rituals and you hang yourself on it. Count your steps between stations. Sip water on the count. Check your feet, check your hands, say the next task out loud before your brain can vote on it. I ran my scaffold for 40 hours, and my error rate at hour 39 was 4% worse than my error rate at hour 1. The proctor at the signal desk, a Drask with surveyor's patience, re-ran my last log block 3 times looking for the collapse the curve said had to be there. Then she flagged my file and sent it up the hill. 88 of us walked out of gate 3. The academy went quiet around me after that, in the way a room goes quiet around a wrong number. I would come into the mess and conversations would bank like turning birds. Cadets from senior intakes drifted down to the ledger wall in the evenings to look at my line, Reyes, M. Human, Gate 4, in Vorek's blocky script, and below it the betting pool's odds, updating like a market feed. Vorek summoned me to his office the night before the press. The room was bare as a cell. Drask don't decorate, except for one thing on the wall. Behind his desk, a curved section of gray chitin plate mounted like a trophy, with a crack running through it that had healed into a ridge of darker shell. I knew what it was before he saw me looking. A molt scar. His own shed plate from 39 years ago. The 9th gate hung where he would see it every day of his working life. Sit, he said. He didn't sit himself. He stood at the window with the gas giant's light coming up off the crater floor, and his quills worked the air between us slowly, like a man turning pages. Your error curve at the sleep gate was flat, he said. Your damage markers after the carry should have degraded your performance 11 to 15%. They did not. The medical wing believes their human baselines are miscalibrated. The registrar believes the Accord sent us an augmented soldier in violation of treaty, and he is assembling the paperwork to prove it. The quills swung toward me. I have tasted augments, Cadet Reyes. You are not one. You are something I have less use for. You are a healthy specimen of a species I cannot read. Is that why the ledger says Gate 4? Because you can't read me? I watched the question land. The quills stilled, and for a moment the great gray plates of his face were just plates, and his voice came out flat and exact. The ledger says Gate 4 because the press is where the body stops mattering, he said. Gates 1 through 3, an animal can pass on conditioning. The press is the first gate that asks the question underneath. When you are beaten, not tired, beaten, on the floor, with the next blow already loading, what are you? I have watched 4,000 cadets answer that question. Your species' literature is full of brave words about it. Literature is what soft worlds have instead of data. He turned back to the window. Tomorrow the gate will open your envelope. For what it is worth, I take no pleasure in it. You have been the most interesting wrong number of my career. For what it's worth, I said, standing, the fire doesn't read the forecast. What? Something we say at home. Good night, gate master. His quills were still spread toward the door when I closed it, and through the gap, in the last second, I saw him turn back to the mounted plate on the wall, the cracked one, the one with his own break healed into it like a ridge of dark glass. The press opened at dawn, and the whole academy came to watch it open on me. The press was a circle of bare deck, 30 meters across, ringed by risers, and the risers were full by first bell. Cadets, instructors, medical staff, the registrar Selleck with his recording wand, and senior officers I'd never seen before, down from the command wing to watch the ledger do what the ledger did. Somebody had chalked the betting line on the riser wall. The smart money had me gone by the 5th round. The rules of the gate were read aloud, as they had been read for 3 centuries, 12 rounds. Each round, a fresh opponent off the rotation, fresh meaning rested, fed, and unhurt. Rounds ended when one fighter could not rise by the 10th count or signaled surrender, open palm to the deck twice. There were no weight classes. There was no protest mechanism. Strikes to the eyes and gills were forbidden. Everything else was the gate's business. You passed the press by being upright or trying to rise when the 12th round was called. You failed it every other way. A Drask proctor named Hessick ran the rotation, and the rotation was supposed to be random. I want that on the record, because of what happened in the 6th round. Rounds 1 and 2 were Veshley, and they came at me the way Veshley come, all 6 limbs, blinding for the first 40 seconds. I spent both rounds on the bicycle, give ground, cover, let the clock eat their fast twitch fire, and finished round 2 with a mouse swelling under my eye and both of them sucking air on their knees. Neither could answer their own 10th count. The crowd noise changed key just slightly, like an orchestra finding its pitch. Round 3 was an Osari. I knew it would happen eventually, and it happened early, and there is no technique on earth for 180 kilos of gravity-bred muscle that has decided to be somewhere you are. He caught me on the half-turn at the 2nd minute, and the deck came up through my left side like a freight elevator. I heard the rib go. Anyone in the first 3 rows heard the rib go. Here's the part they still argue about on Celt, and I can settle it because I was inside it. Vorik was standing at the gatemaster's rail, quills full out, reading me the way he'd read 4,000 cadets, and at that moment, round 3, 2nd minute, rib fresh cracked flat on the deck with an Osari standing off for the count. His instrument told him it had happened. The break. Keldrath. My chemistry did exactly what a breaking body does. Every marker he'd been trained on for 38 years spiked and then troughed, the signature he'd built a career on, the sealed order opening right on schedule. I know this because he told me much later what it tasted like. He said it tasted like being right. I got up on the 8th count, not heroically. There's nothing heroic about it from the inside. There's an inventory. Ribs cracked, not staved. Breathing's expensive, but it works. Legs answer. Vision's clear. The price of standing has gone up. Pay it. I got my feet under me, and I put my guard up over the bad side, and I walked back in because the round wasn't over, and the only way out of the burn is through the black. The Osari looked at me. Then he looked at the gatemaster's rail. I learned afterward that no cadet in the rotation's living memory had risen from a clean Osari body drop to continue the same round. They went down and they stayed down, and the count saved them, and everyone understood that staying down was the sane reading of the situation. He came in again, more carefully, and I lasted the round on movement and spite, and the bell took us both off the deck. On the rail, Gatemaster Vorik's quills were standing out straight as wire, and they stayed that way for the rest of the morning. His instrument said broken. His eyes said walking. A DRAS does not have a category for the gap between those two reports, and I watched a 38-year career fall into it in real time. Rounds 4 and 5 I survived ugly. A Marev with whip-fast feet cut my forehead with a talon heel in the 4th, and the blood kept finding my eye for the rest of the gate. The 5th was another Veshley, who fought the smartest fight anyone fought against me all day. Patient, working the bad rib, and I put her down with the only clean throw my left side had left in it, and stood there leaking while the count ran out on her, and the risers had gone strange and quiet, the way a crowd goes when the script stops matching the stage. Then the 6th round, and Cadet Captain Devore stepped into the circle, and the silence got teeth. Devore was not in the rotation. Devore was senior intake, a DRAS, commissioned track, champion of the press 2 seasons running, with plates the color of wet slate and a reach like a cargo crane. He had no business in a gate circle with a first-season human, and the Proctor Hessick was already turning toward the rail with his hand raised when Devore said, loudly enough for the risers, "The rotation accepts volunteers. Rule of the founder. Read it." Everyone looked at Vorik. I will give the gate master this much. He didn't pretend it wasn't his decision. He stood at the rail with his quills out, tasting whatever was left of me from 30 meters, the blood, the rib, 6 rounds of spend, against whatever Devore was broadcasting, which even I could guess. Eagerness. The pool had Devore's name in it for serious money. The ledger's perfect record was wobbling in public, and here was a senior cadet offering to nail it back down, and the law of the founder said it was legal. The rotation accepts volunteers, Vorik said. Continue. So the 6th round was Devore, and I'm not going to dress it up. He took me apart. He had film on me from 5 rounds and a fresh body and 40 kilos, and he was good, genuinely good, gate champion good. He dropped me twice in the first minute. The second time, the deck and I had a long conversation on the subject of staying together, and I got up on the 9th count with my mouth full of copper. The risers had started making a sound I didn't have a name for, a low DRAS churring, hundreds of throats. I found out later what it meant. It is the sound their species makes at a molt, at the sight of something coming out of its own shell. He dropped me a 3rd time at the 2-minute mark and crouched and said quietly, just for me, in trade tongue without the translator, signal. The gate is answered. There is no shame below this line, human. The ledger is never wrong. There is an answer to that, and it isn't words. I got up on the 8th count, guard up over the ruin of my left side, walk back in. I want to be careful here, because the legend that grew on Celt afterward says I beat him, and the legend is a lie, and the lie misses the entire point. I did not beat Cadet Captain DeVore, the bell beat him. The round ended with me upright, swaying like a snag in a windstorm, having landed maybe 4 meaningful strikes in 3 minutes, and DeVore standing in the middle of the circle, with his arms down, churring softly himself, staring at me like a man whose math had stopped working. He had hit me with everything the gate allowed, everything that had ever been needed. The order had been opened, the contents read aloud, the brake delivered to the floor 3 times, and the thing in front of him kept exercising a veto that his entire species biology said did not exist. He walked out of the circle without being dismissed. Hessick didn't log a violation. Nobody had the spare attention. Rounds 7 through 11 exist in my memory as weather. I know from the record that 2 of my opponents could not answer their own count. That one signaled, fresh against a half-dead human, with the whole academy watching, and that by the 10th round the medical wing's Mariv was standing at the circle's edge with her evacuation kit open, being ignored. I ran my bookkeeping. Pay for this round. Ask again. Pay for this minute. Pay for this breath. Breathing's expensive. Pay it anyway. Somewhere in the 11th round I heard my own voice counting steps in Spanish, my grandmother's numbers, and I let it count. The 12th round was an Osari again, Braca Ven, the one who loaded my rack in the mornings, and I have never received a stranger gift than the one he gave me, which was a completely honest fight, full force, no theater and no mercy, as if he decided the only respect worth giving me was the gate exactly as written. He dropped me once. I got up on the 7th count. When the final bell sounded, I was on my feet in the center of the circle, holding my guard up over a side that had quit listening to me an hour before, and it took 3 repetitions of the stand-down order before my arms believed it. 190 cadets had entered the season. 88 had reached the press. 63 of us passed it. One of us had been written into the ledger of Gate Master Vorik, in his own square hand, as ending there. They tell me the risers were loud. I don't remember loud. What I remember is the Gate Master's rail, and Vorik standing at it after the bell, not moving, quills flat against his jaw, flat unreadable, locked down tight, while the Registrar Selleck leaned in at his shoulder, talking fast, wand blinking, already building the case that the instrument hadn't failed, the specimen had cheated. And I remember walking off the deck on my own feet, because there are doors you make sure you walk through, even if you crawl down the corridor after, and as I passed the rail, Vorik's quills came out, just 2 of them, just slightly, a flicker toward me, and what came through his translator was almost too quiet to catch. 38 years, he said. Bad day for the ledger. I managed. There has never, he said, been a day for the ledger like this one. And then, as the medics finally got their hands on me, medical hold Cadet Reyes. Gate 5 opens in 9 days. The ledger will require a correction. He posted it that night, they tell me, in front of half the academy. He walked to the long wall outside the mess and crossed out Gate 4 next to my name with a single line, the first correction in the document's 38-year history. And in the space, beside it he wrote, Gate 7, the pool went insane. Down in the medical wing, taped and strapped and floating on whatever mare of pharmacology does to a human, I heard it from Ilvis, who had passed the press in the morning session and broken 2 fingers and considered it the bargain of the season. Gate 7, Ilvis said. The quiet gate. He may be right, you know. It isn't a body gate. Everything you did today is useless in there. Then I'll find out what's in the envelope, I said, and slept 11 hours, and woke up to find that the bone knitting in my rib was already 2 days ahead of the medical wing's human Vaseline chart, and that the duty medic had flagged my file again, and that the file was developing a readership up the hill. Gate 5 was the Hunger March, and it was the first gate that felt like home. 6 days, 190 kilometers of crater country, frost-shattered rock, lichen flats, the long ash fields below the southern vents where old eruptions had cooked the ground sterile, no rations. 1 liter of water issued at the start. Each cadet carried signal flares, a medical beacon, and a knife, and the rules said only this. Reach the recovery field by sunset of the 6th day, alive under your own power. The gate did not care how. The cadets who failed it in the first 2 days, and they failed it in the head, not the gut. 6 days is nothing. A healthy body of almost any species carries 6 days of fuel on its frame. But the Veshli metabolism reads an empty stomach as a terminal emergency, an alarm they cannot reason with, and by the 2nd morning the southern route was dotted with medical beacons blinking like sad little stars. The Drask did better. They locked their joints into walking economy and ground forward on doctrine. The doctrine was the problem. Sareth taught that the march was a fuel management exercise. Minimize expenditure, husband the body's reserves, suffer efficiently in a straight line. Nobody had taught them that the country itself was carryable. I came off the first ridge on day 1 reading the ground the way you read a fire's history. Water shows itself if you know the grammar, the green seam of moss in a shadowed fault, the frost melt pooling under slab overhangs by mid-morning. The lichen on the north faces was a polysaccharide mat, the Academy's own survival manual, classed as emergency forage for 6 of the 9 species enrolled. A fact I knew because I had read the manual, which it turned out almost nobody did, because the manual was for emergencies and the march was doctrine. By the 3rd day, I was not hungry in any way that mattered. I was 2 liters ahead on water, and I had started picking up strays. I found Tessic first, a Veshli from my barracks row, folded up in the lee of a boulder with his beacon in his hand, all 6 limbs trembling deep in the metabolic panic spiral. He hadn't triggered the beacon yet. That mattered. Trigger it, and the gate closed on you. I sat on my heels out of his reach and talked to him the way you talk to a rookie, cutting his first night line, low and bored and specific. Then I showed him the lichen prep. Strip, rinse, pound it on a flat rock, get it down you, and the water seemed 40 meters upslope. And the thing I actually came to say, which was, your body is lying to you about the timeline. You are not dying today. You are uncomfortable today. Those are different facts, and you only have to fix one of them. He made the recovery field on day 6, 4 hours behind me. He told the story afterward to anyone who'd hold still, with a Veshli's gift for embellishment, and the embellishments all missed the point too. I didn't save Tessic, I lent him bookkeeping. By day 5 I had a column. It started as 2 and became 7. Cadets I crossed paths with on the southern route, hollow-eyed, doctrine marching, husbanding their misery in straight lines, and one by one I taught them the country, where the water showed, which lichen, which prep, how to bank a fire in sterile ash so it held overnight, which I will admit was showing off, because none of them had ever seen anyone make fire by hand, and the sight of a human crouched in the ashfield dark coaxing a coal out of a bow drill did something to alien morale that no amount of doctrine ever did. On the 5th night the gate played its last card, which was the moon itself. An ash storm came down off the southern vents an hour after dark, not whether you walk through, whether you survive, a black whiteout of glass-fine grit on a 40-knot wind that ate the proctor's watch lamps and dropped visibility to the length of your own arm. The doctrine answer was to scatter and shelter individually, every cadet for himself, beacon in hand. I could feel the column wanting to do it. 7 sets of alien nerves, 5 days hungry, pulling apart at the seams in the dark. We did the other thing. I roped us. Harness lines, clipped in series, the way you string a crew crossing burn snags at night, and put the 2 Asari at anchor points, and got everyone into the lee of a slab formation I'd marked at dusk, because you always read your country before the light goes. Every single dusk, no exceptions. That habit is older than I am, and it has buried fewer people than any doctrine ever written. We stacked rock, banked the fire I'd been carrying as a coal in an ash-lined tin since the 3rd day, and sat out 6 hours of the moon trying to sand us off its face, pressed together in a heap that violated at least 3 species worth of social taboos, and nobody mentioned it once. Somewhere in the middle of it, the mare of Cadet on my left, hollow bone, the storm hitting her hardest, flight species nerve screaming at the enclosure, asked over the wind why I wasn't afraid, and I told her the truth, which was that I was, and that this was the correct amount of afraid, and that fear was just the body posting a watch. Then I told her about a night on a ridge 2 summers before, when the wind had done this same trick with a fire on the wrong side of it, and what my crew boss had said, sitting against the rock, passing a water bottle down the line, the mountain doesn't know you're here. It isn't trying, it's just weather being weather. You don't have to beat it, you only have to be here when it stops. It stopped an hour before dawn. We dug out, counted off, and walked into the recovery field that evening, 9 of 9, the only intact group on the southern route. 2 cadets who had sheltered alone out there triggered their beacons that night. The gate did not count the storm against anyone. The gates, the proctor said, do not apologize either. The proctors logged all of it from their watch stations. Nothing in the rules of the march forbade any of it. The rules said arrive alive, under your own power. Everyone in my column did exactly that. But when we crossed the recovery line on day 6, me first and my 7, walking in like a crew coming off a 14-day roll, dirty and upright and fed, Vorik was waiting at the marker with his quills working, and the first thing he tasted, I am told, was 9 cadets whose stress chemistry had no business being that quiet. The gates are crossed alone. Cadet Reyes, he said. The old line, but his voice had changed since the press. Less sermon in it, more inquiry. Then the founder shouldn't have made the planet so crowded, Gate Master. 2 of the quills flicked, that small involuntary fan I had learned to read as the Drask equivalent of an eyebrow going up, and he logged us, through, all 9, and said nothing else. But that evening at the assembly he did something unprecedented, which was to read the march's results without commentary. 55 cadets remained from 190. He looked at the number for a long moment, quills flat, and dismissed us. And I watched him walk off alone toward the long wall where the ledger hung, and stand in front of it in the dark like a man checking his arithmetic. Gate 6 was the wall, and the wall nearly ended me, and it had nothing to do with hunger or doctrine or anyone's theology. It was just rock and weather and a half-second of bad luck, which is the oldest gate there is. 200 meters of crater cliff climbed under a 20-kilo load. In weather, the gate's designers refreshed every season to keep honest. Fixed lines on the lower pitches, then a long, unprotected traverse on the upper face, where the load did its real work on your forearms and your nerve. We climbed in a katabatic wind that came down off the rim in slabs you could lean on. Drask are magnificent on rock. Those ratcheting joints lock onto holds and simply do not tire. And for the first time all season, I watched Alien. Cadets do something better than I would ever do it. Worth saying. It was a school after all, and that day it taught me. A third of the way up the traverse, the wind shifted 90 degrees in half a breath, my loaded pack swung like a wrecking ball, and my left hand jammed into a flake crack to catch 400 and some newtons of swinging human, and the third and fourth metacarpals went like green branch wood. I heard them over the wind. The inventory, then one more time, 60 meters of air under my boots. Hands broken, 2 bones, maybe 3, fingers still close at a price. Right hand sound, feet sound, 80 meters of traverse left, and no rule of the gate that says a hand has to work, only that the cadet has to arrive at the top with the load. I wedged the broken hand deeper into the crack, hung off it screaming on the inside and breathing on the outside, and got my tape off my harness with my teeth, field splint, taped the bad fingers to the good ones, taped the whole ruin into a hook, climbed the last 80 meters using the left arm as a dead man's anchor and the right arm as a climber. It took me 50 minutes. The proctor stationed on the rim watched me come over the edge with my hand taped into a club, load intact, and reach for his evacuation tablet, and I said Cadet Reyes, Gate 6, complete before he could touch it, because the words in that order made it official and the tablet would have made it medical. In the medical wing, they cut the tape off, and the Meriv medic looked at the hand, and then at me, and then back at the hand, and called over 2 colleagues, and the 3 of them had a conversation in their own fluting language, of which I understood only the tone, which was the tone of people watching a chart fail. Human bone, it turns out, knits on a schedule the Seraph medical wing simply refused to believe until they had imaged it daily for a week. 12 days later, I had a hand. Stiff, ugly, mine. The Meriv filed her 3rd flag on me. I learned later that her flags had stopped going to the registrar and started going directly to the command wing because the registrar had begun returning them annotated with the word anomalous, and the medic, in the way of medics everywhere, considered anomalous to be a confession of professional surrender. 51 cadets stood for Gate 7. The night before it opened, the academy did its now traditional pilgrimage to the ledger wall because Gate 7 was the gate of the correction. Gate 7, in the gate master's square hand, his second prediction on me, posted in front of everyone with his record already cracked. Ilvis found me at the rail outside the barracks, looking up at the gas giant. The Quinn had made it through everything. The march nearly took her, the wall should have, and she'd come over the rim that day 2 ropes behind me, whistling thinly the whole way, hating every meter, refusing to stop. Quinn don't quit, it turns out. They just complain at a frequency that carries. He spent 30 years building a doctrine out of where he broke, Ilvis said without preamble. You understand that's what the ledger is. He reached the 9th gate, he broke, and he made a religion that says the break is the truth of a person. If you pass 7, the gills rippled. It isn't your file that has a problem, it's his. I know. Do you also know he requested the proctor seat for your run tomorrow? He hasn't sat the quiet gate personally in 9 years. He'll be on the other side of the glass the whole time, tasting everything you've got. I thought about the mounted plate on his office wall. The crack healed into a dark ridge, hung where he'd see it every working day for 39 years. Good, I said. Then somebody will finally be reading the file firsthand. The quiet gate was a room 3 meters square, dark past the reach of any instrument the eye owns, soundproof to the threshold of hallucination, temperature bled to neutral so that after the first hour you lost the borders of your own skin, no tasks, no clock, no light. The gate had one rule: stay. You could leave whenever you wanted, the door was never locked, and the moment you touched it, the gate closed on you forever. Pass condition: 20 hours. You were not told when 20 hours had elapsed. You were told nothing at all. For the Drask, it was the cruelest gate of the 9, and it took me half the season to understand why. A Drask is never alone. Their whole society rides on the scent web, a chemical murmur of family, rank, mood, presence, painted on the air of every room they share. A Drask in a scrubbed, sealed chamber isn't experiencing solitude. He's experiencing amputation. The web goes silent, and some assembly deeper than thought concludes that everyone else is dead. Vorek's ledger had a grim shorthand for cadets predicted to fail here: websoft. He had written it beside hundreds of names in 38 years, and he had never once been wrong about it. 40 minutes before my run, suited and sealed, watched a DRAS cadet from the morning group come out of the chamber after 6 hours, walking wrong, quills strobing, making the broken churr they make when the web won't answer. The proctors took him away gently. The DRASC are not gentle about much, but they are gentle about that. Then it was me and the door and the dark. I'm not going to pretend the quiet gate was nothing, because the people who pretend hardship was nothing are performing for someone, and there's no one to perform for in that room. That's the entire mechanism of it. The first hours were fine, the middle was not. Somewhere past the point where my skin's borders dissolved, my brain began doing what every human brain does in sensory dark. It started manufacturing its own content, and not the pleasant kind. The dead air grew textures, the silence acquired a pulse and then a direction. Around what I later learned was hour 11 I heard, with perfect clarity, my crew boss's voice from 2 summers gone calling a wind shift on a fire that had long since stopped existing, and I sat in the absolute black of an alien moon with my heart slamming, fully aware it wasn't real. Learning what every species in that academy had to learn in that room, that knowing the alarm is false does not turn the alarm off. So I did what humans do, because it turns out it's load-bearing. I built a scaffold in the dark and hung myself on it. I rebuilt my home unit's engine, bolt by bolt, out loud, carburetor, fuel lines, the water pump with the gasket that always wept. I walked the 18 watch-out situations of wildland firefighting, the litany every rookie learns, 1 through 18 and back down, the way you'd tell a rosary. Fire not scouted, country not seen in daylight, safety zones not identified. I named my whole crew, both summers, in order of their positions on the line, and what each of them carried, and what each of them was bad at. I sang exactly one song, my grandmother's, quietly, once, and put it for later in case the dark got worse, because rationing is rationing. Time went strange, then hostile, then, and this is the part the DRAS proctors refused to believe until they pulled the biometric record, boring. Hour 15 to 16, somewhere in there, the manufactured terrors ran out of budget, and the dark just became a long night shift. And I have sat 1,000 long night shifts. I checked my feet. I sipped from the suit line on account. I started designing in some detail the fishing cabin I intend to die in at age 90, and I had gotten as far as arguing with myself about the porch joists when the lights came up. 27 hours. They hadn't opened the door at 20. I learned why afterward, and the why is the only part of the quiet gate I'm vain about. The proctor's bench had kept me in past the pass threshold by unanimous vote, because the gate's instruments were telling them something unprecedented, and they could not agree on whether the instruments had failed. Every cadet who had ever passed the quiet gate passed it climbing, stress curves rising hour over hour, white-knuckled to the threshold, surviving the room. My curve had peaked at hour 11 and then come down and flattened and stayed flat, sinking gently toward what the bench's DRASC instruments classified, hour after impossible hour, as contentment. They kept me in because they were certain the reading had to break. It never broke. A human being alone in the dark with nothing but her own mind had eventually made herself at home in it, and there was no column in the gate's 300-year-old records for at home. When I came out, Vorik was standing at the observation glass exactly where Ylvis had said he would be, and he had been there, the bench log shows, for all 27 hours. He didn't say anything as I passed. His quills were spread full, drinking whatever 27 hours of that had left on me, and the plates of his face were doing something I had never seen plates do, and a DRASC bench proctor told me much later, drunk on commission night, what the face meant, because every DRASC in the room had recognized it instantly. It was the face they make at a funeral, not grief, witness. The ledger died on the other side of that glass, and its keeper stood at full attention the whole time it went. He corrected the wall that night for the second time. He didn't post a new gate, where the prediction belonged next to Reyes M. Human, the Academy woke to a single DRASC word, and the Academy's older hands had to explain to the younger ones what it meant, and the mess was quiet at breakfast. Velkoran, untasted country. It's a surveyor's term from Old DRASC from the map-making casts. It means the map ends here, and the failure belongs to the map. 44 cadets stood for Gate 8, the burn. I had been waiting for the burn all season, the way you wait for the one question on the exam you happen to have written your thesis on, and I want to be honest, I had also been dreading it for the same reason. The burn was a rescue gate, a 3-level mock habitat block, instrumented and reconfigurable that the gate crew set genuinely alight. Controlled, shepherded, but real flame, real smoke, real 200-degree ceilings, with weighted casualty dummies distributed through the levels, and for the senior variant, live volunteer casualties from the staff. Each cadet went in alone, in standard kit, no breathing rig. The founders' rules predated them, and the founders had not been kind enough to update. and the gate scored you on casualties out, time in, and decisions made. It was the only gate of the 9 that scored judgment. You could pass the burn carrying nobody if leaving them was right. You could fail at a hero. The aliens feared the burn the way I'd feared the quiet gate as foreign country. Most spacefaring species, it turns out, are afraid of fire in a way humans simply are not, and it isn't cowardice, it's history. They industrialized on worlds with thinner oxygen, or underwater, or in chitin that chars. They got off planet centuries before we did into hulls where fire is the death of everyone, and the fear is doctrine now. Bone deep, fire is a hull breach that spreads. The Veshli ahead of me in the order came out of the block at 4 minutes with 1 dummy and his judgment scores in ruins. Having taken a corridor the smoke had already closed, the Asari muscled through honestly and lost points only to time. The Drask were methodical and slow, and you could see the cost of every meter in their gait, joints locking against the bodies screaming. Doctrine dragging biology by the collar. Then my bell and the block and the smoke rolling out the second-level windows in the slow fat coils that tell you exactly what the interior is doing, and for the first time since the shuttle landed on Kelt, I was the local. I read the building from the apron for 10 full seconds while the clock ran, because 10 seconds of reading buys you minutes of not dying where the fire lived, where it wanted to go, what the wind through the broken stairwell was feeding. Then I went in low and left, under the smoke, one hand on the wall, counting doors. The casualty layout was honest chaos, a dummy in a collapsed corridor that could be reached and shouldn't be. The ceiling sag over it was a sentence, with one ending, and I left it out loud for the record, the way you call it on a real line. Not survivable, not retrievable, moving. 2 dummies in the second-level common room, retrievable in series with a rest between. The live volunteer, a staff Drask with full plates, braver than his whole species doctrine, crouched exactly where a frightened person crouches, in the worst place, the dead-end washroom past the heat, and getting him out was a knee walk under a ceiling that chewed the shoulders of my kit, talking the whole way. Low and bored and specific, the rookie on the line voice, because a casualty who panics in a crawlspace kills you both. He gripped my collar with one enormous gray hand and kept his face down like I told him, and we came out the north window onto the escape rig with the second level lighting up orange behind us. I went back in twice more for the common room dummies. The gate logs say I was in the block 31 minutes and that the decision record graded flawless, which it wasn't. I took 1 corridor on memory that I should have reread, and the fire had moved, and the margin on that mistake was about 40 seconds. I include that because the legend doesn't, and the 40 seconds is the truest part of the story. Earth's gift isn't immunity, it's familiarity. The fire was never my friend. It was my neighbor, and I knew its habits. And aliens watched a human walk out of the smoke adjusting her collar and concluded, in their bones, something that wasn't quite true and would never quite leave them. Vorik met me on the apron. The burn was the one gate where the gatemaster's tasting quills were useless. The smoke salted the air past reading, and so for the first time all season he had only his eyes, like everybody else. The washroom retrieval, he said. The volunteer outmatched you 2.5 times. If he had panicked and seized you, the ceiling corridor would have closed on you both. You knew this. Yes. Then your decision record should be graded with an error. Probably, I said, pulling my gloves. I'd make it again. The quills came out then. Smoke or no smoke, old habit hunting for the chemistry of bravado, of performance, of the adrenaline lie, and finding, I imagine, nothing but the alarm that never stops ringing. He stood there a moment, plates unreadable. 39 years ago, he said, I scored this gate the second best of my intake. And then, before I could decide what to do with that, 41 cadets will stand for commissioning Cadet Reyes. The season is over. The 8 gates are passed. Whatever else you are an officer of the Ascendancy, and I will sign it. He turned to go, joints clicking, and stopped because I hadn't moved, and the apron crew hadn't moved, and the whole gathered crowd of them was looking at me, because the Academy had spent 6 weeks watching me do arithmetic, and they could all see me carrying the one. There are 9 gates, I said. You could have heard a quill drop on that apron. The rules of the 9th gate were read to me 3 days later in the Dean's chamber, formally, with witnesses, because the Academy required that an attempting cadet hear them aloud and consent to each one. Registrar Selleck read them, and he read them the way a man reads a will he expects to inherit under. 1. The 9th gate is voluntary. No cadet may be ordered, encouraged, or induced to attempt it. 2. The attempt is solitary and continuous, all 8 gates condensed in sequence, without relief. The stand, the carry, the waking, the press, the hunger, the wall, the quiet, the burn, under the founder's original parameters which exceed the modern seasons in every gate. 3. The attempt is witnessed. The Academy stands down from all duties. Every cadet and officer observes. The Ascendancy considers what happens at the 9th gate too instructive to waste. 4. A cadet who fails the ninth gate forfeits the commission already earned, entirely, irrevocably. There is no partial credit at the ninth gate, and there is no second attempt. 11 cadets have attempted it since the rebuild, Selleck said, laying the tablet down with the care of a man handling evidence. The roll of their names is read at every commissioning, where their commissions would have been read. You have heard the roll twice now, cadet. You are asked the formal question. Knowing the roll, do you consent? The chamber had filled beyond the witnesses the rule required. Officers along the walls, the mayor of Medic with her flags. Dvor, who had not spoken to me since the 6th round of the press, standing at parade rest like he'd been carved there. And Vorik by the window, quills locked flat, who had not said one word to me since the apron. Because of Rule 1, I realized, looking at him. No cadet may be encouraged. He had been silent for 3 days on a point of law. One question first, I said. Selleck's plates clicked irritation. Questions were not in the ceremony. I asked it anyway. The 11 who failed. Where did they break? It was Vorik who answered from the window without turning. 4 at the condensed press, 3 on the wall, 2 in the quiet, 1 in the burn. A pause, 1 click of joints. 1 on the wall section, at the 19th hour, 4 meters from the top. Then the gate's never seen the back half run fresh, I said. Somebody should look at the whole map. I consent. They scheduled it for the dark of Kelt's long eclipse, when the gas giant ate the sun for 30 hours straight. Tradition, apparently. The founder believed the 9th should be run in the dark country between days. The academy stood down. 41 newly minted almost officers, 300 staff, the command wing, the medical wing, all of it ringed around the great training bowl where the gate stations had been assembled by crews working around the clock, and I will tell you the strangest thing about the morning it began. It was the first quiet I'd heard on Kelt that had people in it. 350 bodies, and you could hear the wind work the crater rim. The Drask call that assembly silence Dro Keth, the held web. They make it for the dying and for the great, and they had never been sure, the older ones told me later, which one they were making it for that morning. I'm not going to walk you through all 30 hours. I kept no narrative in there. Narrative is expensive, and I was running a budget. What I have is the gate log, the witness record, and the weather of my own memory, so here is the true shape of the 9th gate, told the way I held it, which was 1 station at a time, because the only way to eat a mountain is never to look at the mountain. The stand, at Founder's parameters, ran the plates to 1.9, 3 hours. I paid for it out of the legs and tried not to spend the back. The carry was the same sled, the same rim road, alone, no partner, no Ilvis on the rail, and the Proctor's lamps strung up the switchbacks made a rosary of the dark, and I climbed it bead by bead. The waking was waved in the only mercy the founder ever wrote. The whole attempt was the waking. The clock simply never stopped. By the time I reached the condensed press, 6 rounds, fresh opponents, founder's rules, I had been under load 11 hours. And the bowl was so silent between bells that I could hear the opponents breathing in their corners. The 4th was Brakaven, who gave me, again, the gift of 0 mercy. I answered the count twice. I was upright at the last bell. The witness record says the rounds took 19 minutes. In the budget book it says 1 entry, paid. Between stations the founder's rules allowed transit time and nothing else. No aid, no contact, no voice. But they could watch, all 350 of them, and the watching became its own station. At the water point after the press I sat on the issue crate under the lamps with the whole bowl rising dark around me, and my hands had picked up a tremor that wasn't pain, just spend, the muscles voting on a recall I wasn't holding, and I taped them. Wrists, then the bad knuckles, working the roll with my teeth the way you do when there's nobody to hold the end, and the silence while I did it had a texture I have never felt anywhere else in my life. 350 beings of 9 species watching a human tape her own hands in a circle of lamplight in the dark country between days, and not one sound. I could see Vorik at the gatemaster's rail, forbidden by Rule 1 from so much as inclining his head. I could see Ilvis, who had found a place in the first riser, sitting with both webbed hands pressed flat to her own knees, doing the Quen arithmetic. She told me afterwards she had calculated my remaining budget 11 different ways that night and gotten 11 answers, all insufficient, and I could see the registrar's wand, its little recording light, steady on me like a patient red star. The Proctor's lamps came up on the rim road for the carry's second running, and a sound did cross the bowl then, a low Asari rumble from somewhere in the third riser, brief, immediately swallowed. It was Brakaven, and he was sanctioned 2 demerits for it, and he told me at commissioning, with no remorse whatsoever, that it had been a fair price for saying what the whole bowl was thinking, which in Osari requires only 1 word. The word translates as still. The hunger ran concurrent from the 12th hour, no rations to the end, water at stations, and the wall came at the 19th. The founder's wall was the same 200 meters, with the protection stripped back to the bolts of 60 years ago, and the long eclipse owned the upper face, so I climbed the traverse in lamplight with my breath icing the rock, on 20 hours of spend, with a left hand whose newest bones were 11 weeks old. And I want this part exact because it is the hinge of everything that came after, and because 350 witnesses watched it on the instrument feeds and still argue about it. At the 19th hour, on the wall section, 4 meters from the top, I broke. I don't mean I despaired, and I don't mean I quit, because I didn't, and that's the point everything turns on. But I am not going to pretend it was the bookkeeping holding me by then, because the books had stopped balancing 2 stations back. There on the lamplit traverse my body delivered the invoice the Drask had been promising me all season. The hand stopped answering. Not weakened, stopped, both of them, mid-reach, frozen on the rock while the cold came up through the rope like a patient animal, and for a length of time the feed clock records as 50 seconds and my memory records as a geologic age. Cadet Marisol Reyes hung 4 meters below the rim of the Founder's Wall. Finished, Keldrath, the stop. Every instrument on the bowl floor confirmed it. The gate's own sensors, calibrated 60 years ago to detect exactly this, logged it in the record in the Founder's own notation, the first valid brake signature the rebuilt 9th gate had ever taken from a body still on the wall. Subject brake confirmed. The Drask in the bowl began very quietly the funeral chur. 300 throats. I could hear it come up the face, under the wind. What happened in those 50 seconds is the only part of this story I can't put numbers on, so I'll put the truth on it instead, plain as I can. Nothing mystical happened. No reserve tank opened, no light came down. What happened is that the stop arrived, the real one, the one Vorik built the theology on, and I made its acquaintance, hanging there in the dark with the chur rising, and I found out what my species apparently keeps finding out at the bottom of every record anyone has ever kept on us, which is that for a human being the stop is a place and not an ending. You can stand in it. The wind blows through it. It is, in fact, very quiet there, quieter than the quiet gate, and on the far side of that quiet my right hand, on no authority from me. The log shows no signal it could have been answering. Closed over the next hole, then the left. Tape stiff, 11 weak bones. Closing like a rusted gate, but closing. 4 meters, it took 11 minutes. The feed has it all. A broken thing climbing, in defiance of a confirmed signature, one dead slow hold at a time, while the funeral chur in the bowl faltered, wavered, and turned. The older Drask caught it first, the bench proctors, the ones who knew the instruments couldn't lie. The chur slid upward in pitch, throat by throat, into the other one, the molt sound, the one they make at the sight of something coming out of its own shell, and by the time my hand came over the rim of the Founder's Wall, 350 witnesses in the held web were making a sound that no Academy on Celt had ever heard at a 9th gate, and the gate's own log, in its 60-year-old notation, entered the line that would cross the ascendancy by morning and reach Earth inside a week. Subject break, confirmed. Subject continuing. No precedent, no precedent, no precedent. The quiet after that was almost a kindness, 4 hours sealed in the Founder's dark cell, and I am told the bench wept at my curve, which sank and flattened and rested, because I had been to a quieter place that night, and the room held no further news. And the burn at the 29th hour was the gate welcoming me home, the block alight, the casualties placed, my legs gone to timber and my hands gone to hooks, and the local, the neighbor, the human, low and left and counting doors, walking the last casualty out of the smoke into the eclipse dark as the long night ended. And the sun came over the gas giant's shoulder, and the bell of the 9th gate, which had hung silent in its yoke for 60 years, which half the Academy believed was welded, sounded once and cracked the held web open, and the bowl came down off the risers like a sea. 190 cadets had come to the gates of Sereth that season. 41 had passed 8 gates. 1 had walked through the 9th, on the 60th year, in 30 hours and 9 minutes, and was sitting in the recovery field getting a broken hand retaped while 3 species shouted her name into the morning. It lasted 1 day. Then the registrar voided it. The finding came down on official channels at mid-morning under the registrar's seal, in language so clean you could shave with it. Finding of the Office of Records, Sereth War Academy, in the matter of the 9th gate attempt of Cadet Reyes, am human, void, instrument failure. The reasoning ran 4 pages, and I will give you its spine in 3 sentences. Because as much as I came to despise it, it was not stupid, and you should hear it the way the Ascendancy's lawyers heard it. The 9th gate certification rests on continuous valid biometric observation under the Founder's calibrations, which were built on the break signature, Keldrath, as a terminal event. The instruments logged a confirmed terminal break, followed by continuation, which is by definition impossible. Therefore, the instruments demonstrably failed in the presence of this subject's documented anomalous chemistry. An attempt that cannot be validly observed cannot be certified, And an uncertified attempt at the ninth gate is in law no attempt at all. Void. Not failed. Failed would have cost me the commission, and even Selleck didn't try to walk that road. Just erased. The bell that rang across the bowl at dawn had, legally speaking, rung for nothing. The line in the gate log, no precedent 3 times over, was reclassified as a system fault that proved its own unreliability. By the registrar's lights, it was almost elegant. The more impossible the thing I'd done, the more thoroughly the doing of it proved the gauges were broken. The Academy did not take it elegantly. Tessick had to be talked out of organizing something the Veshley call a grievance swarm, which is exactly what it sounds like. Brakovin and 2 other Osari stood in the registrar's outer office for 6 hours in formal silence, which is the Osari version of the same thing. And Ilvis read all 4 pages twice and put them down and said the truest sentence anyone said that week. He has not written that you failed. He has written that you cannot be measured. Understand? For a records cast drask, that is not a lie. It is a confession of terror with a seal on it. Vorek fought it. I want that in the record too, because of every road open to him. The registrar's finding was the one paved and lit for him personally. Instrument failure meant the ledger had never been wrong. Not at the press. Not at the quiet gate, not anywhere. The species was simply unreadable, the gauges blameless, the doctrine intact. 38 years of theology restored at the stroke of a seal. All he had to do was nothing. He was a drask of the old discipline. 2 years from retirement, with his own brake mounted on his office wall, and the finding handed him back his life's work in exchange for 1 quiet abstention. He filed a witness certification instead that afternoon over his own seal. I have a copy. Every commissioning officer at Sereth gets a copy now. That's a tradition I'll come back to. It is 1 paragraph long, and the paragraph ends. I have kept the ledger of the gates for 38 years on the doctrine that the break is the truth of a body, and the truth is terminal. On the 19th hour of the attempt under review, I observed with my own quills at a range of 4 meters, a confirmed Keldrath in the subject, followed by 11 minutes of ascent. The instruments did not fail, the doctrine did. I certify the attempt, and I place the ledger's record at the Academy's disposal for review. Since it now appears I have spent my career measuring where cadets stop, believing they can continue, which is a different and lesser thing than where they can. For a human officer, that paragraph would have been a hard day. I did not understand for some time what it was for a drask of the record's discipline to write the instruments did not fail, the doctrine did over his own seal, and submit it to the caste that had raised him. Ilvis understood. Ilvis read it and made a long, low sound through her gills and said, "He has just attempted his own 9th gate. Mind that you're worth it." The board convened 3 days later, and it split exactly along the fault line you'd expect. The registrar's finding was procedurally flawless. The gatemaster's certification was unprecedented but not nothing, and between them sat the commandant, an old Osari with a campaign history longer than my species' spaceflight history, who listened to 4 hours of argument about calibration law, and then turned to where I sat in the witness row and asked the only question anyone asked me in the entire proceeding. Cadet, the registrar holds that what happened on the wall cannot be measured by any instrument this Academy possesses. Do you dispute it? No, sir, I said. I hold that it can be measured by the instrument the founder actually specified, which is witnesses. 350 of them, standing the held web in the dark for 30 hours. The biometrics came 60 years ago with the rebuild. The founder's own parameters. I'd had 3 days in the law library with Ilvis, who reads Ricard's cast drask the way I read fire, certify a 9th gate attempt on the sworn observation of the assembled Academy. The gauges were always a convenience, sir. The witness was always the gate. The commandant looked at Selleck for a long moment. Then he said the words that made everything after possible. The finding of void is sustained. And over the noise there was noise, he continued. Evenly, like a man laying a beam exactly where he'd always intended. A void attempt is no attempt. The cadet's eligibility is therefore intact, as is her standing consent. If she elects to walk the 9th gate, the Academy will assemble such observation, instrumented and sworn, as no record of any caste may dispute. Office of Records to certify the protocols personally. A pause you could have parked a dropship in, at every station registrar, in person. Since the instruments cannot be trusted, we will be needing your quills. That is how the law of the gates of Sereth, 3 centuries old, written by a founder who believed nothing should ever be survivable twice, came to schedule 1 cadet to walk the 9th gate a 2nd time. They gave me 12 days, on the medical wing's insistence, and the Mariv medic spent them running protocols on me that I suspect history will eventually call the founding documents of human performance science in the ascendancy, and that I at the time called Tuesday. The hand got new tape. The rib got imaged and pronounced, in the Mariv's flat clinical fluting, implausible. The Academy spent the 12 days building the strangest apparatus in its history around the gate's 9 stations. Dual-calibrated biometrics, human Vaseline gear shipped up from the Accord mission on emergency priority, sworn observer benches at every station, and at each bench, by the Commandant's order, a records cast proctor under oath, with the registrar himself assigned to the station his own finding had made famous. The wall, 19th hour, 4 meters from the top. The night before Vorik came to the barracks. Rule 1 was dead. No inducement could matter now. And so for the first time since the apron of the burn, he was permitted to simply talk to me, and what he did instead was stand in the doorway a moment, joints clicking softly, and then set something on the table. The mounted plate from his office wall, the molt scar, the dark-heeled ridge of his own break, 39 years on the nail above his desk. I was going to tell you what the 19th hour will feel like the second time, he said. But you are the only being alive who already knows. So I will tell you the only thing I know that you do not. His quills came out, slow all the way, the full fan, and held there. A drask standing completely readable on purpose, which I understood by then to be roughly equivalent to a human standing at. Attention with his ribs open. When I broke on that wall, I believed for 39 years that the gate had told me what I was. You have shown the institution otherwise. But the institution is plate cadet. Plate heals slowly and looks backward while it does. Tomorrow, when you stand in the stop, and you will, the second walk is longer. Every veteran of every wall knows the second walk is longer. You will not be standing in it for the record or for your species seats at the Accord, or for me. Those are loads. Set them down at the first station with the rest of the gear. Walk it the way you walked into the dark room, as the only one there. He left the plate on my table. It sat there all night, gray in the gas giant's light, the crack along it like a mountain ridge on an old map. And in the morning, when I racked my gear at the first station in front of the sworn benches of the second attempt, I set it on the proctor's table at Station 1 with the rest of what I wasn't carrying. The second walk took 32 hours and 40 minutes. It was, as promised, longer, and I will spare you the stations except for the 2 that matter to the record and the 1 that matters to me. The press at the second walk broke me early. The body keeps honest books, and 12 days had not paid for 30 hours. And the bench's new human-calibrated gauges and the sworn quills of 4 records cast proctors logged a confirmed break in the 5th round, 11 hours sooner than the first walk, followed by the now documented impossibility, continuation. The funeral church started and turned to the molt sound in under a minute that time. The Academy was learning the tune and the wall. The 19th hour found me on the same traverse in the same lamplight, with Registrar Selleck harnessed to the rock 4 meters below the rim at his appointed bench, exactly where Law and the Commandant's mercy had nailed him, close enough that his own quills, the finest instruments of the records cast, the quills that had voided me, could taste every molecule coming off the subject under review. The stop arrived on schedule. The hands quit, both of them mid-reach. The cold came up the rope, and I stood in the quiet place again, longer, this time. The second walk is longer, with the registrar of the Sareth War Academy hanging in the dark an arm's length away, reading me the way his whole cast had read 4,000 years of bodies, tasting the confirmed terminal, doctrinally absolute end of Cadet Reyes, M. Human. Then the right hand closed on the next hold, and I heard over the wind, under the chur turning, the sound of a records cast drask, beginning very quietly against every discipline of his calling, to sing the molt with everyone else. I came over the rim of the Founder's Wall for the second time in my life at the 19th hour and 51 minutes, and somewhere below, 350 witnesses and 1 converted registrar were making the kind of noise that gets written down. The bell of the 9th gate rang for the second time in 60 years at the 32nd hour and 40 minutes of the second walk, as I came out of the burn with the last casualty across my shoulders and the eclipse breaking gold over the gas giant's rim, and this time nobody could void it, because this time the record had been written by the registrar's own quills, sworn at every station, and certified before he was off the wall. I slept for 19 hours. When I woke, the Meriv medic was sitting beside the cot with her tablet, and she didn't ask me any clinical questions at all. She asked me the other kind. On the wall, she said. The second time, when the signature confirmed. What is in that place? And I gave her the only honest answer I have ever found, the one that ended up, decades later and against my wishes, carved over the door of a building on Kelt. Wind. It's quiet. There's room to stand. That's all. There's room to stand. The Ascendancy's response was bureaucratic, which is to say enormous. Within the season, the Accord's 6 human seats a year became 40. Within 2, the Sareth Medical Wing had a human physiology department with a Meriv at its head. The gate log's triple no precedent became, I'm reliably informed, the most cited line in the Ascendancy's officer doctrine literature, where the scholars gave the thing on the wall a formal name in High Drask that translates more or less as the country past the stop, and noted in the dry way of scholars that to date only one species had been observed to hold territory there, and that the strategic implications were left to the reader. Devore requested assignment to the first mixed species command track and got it. He found me on the landing pad the day the senior intakes shipped out, stood at parade rest, and said, "In the 6th round I told you the ledger is never wrong." He let that sit exactly one beat. I am told the new edition will be shorter. Then he saluted me, the full plate-flat salute, senior to junior, which was backwards, and we both knew it, and boarded his shuttle, and I never saw him again, though I read his name years later in a dispatch from the frontier, in the casualty list's other column, the one for officers whose units came back because their commander didn't. Selleck never apologized, which I respected more than the alternative. What he did instead was records cast to the bone. He reopened 60 years of Ninth Gate files, re-examined the 11 failed attempts under the new doctrine, and found in 2 of them, a Veshley in the rebuild's first decade, and Osari 20 years later, break signatures followed by seconds of unexplained continuation before the proctors of those eras, certain of what a break meant, had physically pulled the cadets from the course. They had been stopped, his amended finding concluded, but they had not stopped. The ascendancy granted both commissions posthumously. The roll of the 11 is still read at every Seraph commissioning, but it is read differently now, not as a warning, as an apology. And Vorik. On commissioning day, with the whole academy assembled, the gatemaster of Seraph walked to the long wall outside the mess, where the ledger had hung for 38 years, and took it down. He did not destroy it. Records cast, to the bone. He carried it to the archive, signed it in, and posted in its place a single-frame page which hangs there yet, and which every new intake reads on its first morning, usually without understanding it. It is his witness certification from the board, the one that ends the instruments did not fail. The doctrine did. Below it, in the space where 60 years of breaking point predictions used to go, there is now just one line in his square hand. The gates find out where you stop. They have no authority on what you do there. He offered me the post the same afternoon in his bare office, under the pale rectangle on the wall where his molt plate had hung for 39 years, keeper of Gate 4, the press, an instructor's billet attached to my commission, first human on the permanent staff of the Gates of Seraph. Not because you passed, he said, quills out, fully readable, the new habit he kept to the end of his life. 11 cadets in 60 years had the strength for the 9th gate. You may believe me, I tasted everyone. Because when the next cadet stands in the stop, and we will be sending them there on purpose now, it is in the curriculum. The Accord is furious about the liability language. Someone has to be standing at the rail who has held ground in that country. The Academy owns one such instructor in the known galaxy. I am told she also fights adequately. That was as close to a joke as I ever heard him come. I took the post. So here is where the story ends, because this is where it ends every year now, on the first morning of every new intake, and I have come to think of it as the only ending it ever really had. The gravity plates come up at dawn. 190 new cadets take the loaded rack, Veshley, Osari, Mariv, Drask, Quinn, and every year now a few from Earth, because 40 seats fill fast. Gatemaster Vorik walks the rows, joints clicking, quills out, tasting each of them the way he has for 4 decades. He is not permitted to tell them where they will break anymore. The new doctrine forbids it, and he wrote the new doctrine. What he does instead, at the end of the first hour, is stop at the head of the line and tell them, in that voice like gravel settling, the new ordinance of the Gates of Seraph. The gates do not train you. The gates find out what you are. For 60 years, this academy believed that what you are has a floor, and that the floor is where the truth lives. Then a cadet of this academy went down to the floor, twice, in front of every instrument and every witness we possess, and walked around down there, and came back up with the deed. The floor is real. You will meet it. What it means is your own business. The keeper of Gate 4 will now demonstrate. And then they all turn, 190 of them, in 9 flavors of alien, plus the handful of human kids in the back with their hearts hammering exactly the way mine did. And they look at the short woman standing at the 4th station with 2 rebuilt metacarpals, a smoke-cured voice, and a line of old mold plate mounted at the gate behind her, gray, cracked, heeled along the crack into a ridge like a mountain range on an old map. A gift from its previous owner who said when he gave it, it was never a trophy, it was a map. I simply read it wrong for 39 years. The crack is not where the country ends, it is where it begins. They look at me the way you look at untasted country. I look back at them the way the fire looks at the forecast. And then I step onto the plates, and we begin.